Coming up on the Mind Caddie.
People argue all day about stretching, and in reality, it's the wrong problem to begin with. It's not a length problem.
Could you go into some detail about why, for a lot of people, that's potentially impossible for them to do because of the way that their body's actually moving, and just by telling themselves to move in a certain way, that's really, really not going to happen?
I think it's pretty well known at this point, particularly in the age of YouTube, like what kind of an efficient golf swing should quote unquote look like. Now all of a sudden you fixed that one problem you were trying to address, but now you probably introduced another problem or inefficiency. So unfortunately we end up chasing our tail a lot, I think, as amateurs.
Mind Caddie.
Hello, Chris. Thanks very much for joining me on the show again.
My pleasure, Carl. It's I always look forward to this. There's no better podcast that I think that I enjoy than this one. It's always so fun. I always try, like when we have our podcast, I always try to learn something. You're one of the few that I come on and I still learn something every single time. So it's awesome. I love coming on and being your guest.
No, I mean, we've had brilliant feedback each time from the previous ones that we've done. And you've worked with a bunch of guys that I work with, and vice versa, which is brilliant. Combining the two, which getting some excellent results. One of the things I wanted to go into tonight, Chris, was I may be on the right track or maybe on the wrong track. Hopefully you'll put me and the other listeners right on this. Let's go into the myths and misconceptions around stretching. Everybody thinks you should stretch. Everybody is told it's good for you. What's the good, bad, and the sort of ugly around stretching?
Yeah, I think the general consensus of stretching is obviously it's a positive one. I think a lot of the negatives or the misunderstandings is I would actually call stretching a bundled term, meaning that I think we need to kind of break it down, what I think a lot of people derive from it, right? So the idea of getting more mobile, or, if you can only touch, reach down and you try and touch your toes and you only get to your knees, that getting down to your feet, you'd feel a little better. Like, yeah, obviously you'd have more mobility or flexibility, whatever we want to call it. I think the big misconception with stretching is that if you try to bend down and touch your toes, keeping your legs straight, and let's say you try to hold it for 30 seconds, that if you do that a couple times and you do that every day, that over time, let's say your hamstrings they feel tight, quote unquote. So let's say the conception is like they're only 6 inches and they need to be 8 inches. So if I hold a stretch for 30 seconds or a minute and I do that every day, that I'll add 2 inches of length to the muscles. And so I think that fundamentally is when someone says I got to stretch, they think of I need to make my muscles longer. And when you look at the actual contracture research, you go down to like the fiber level of muscles, like the actin and myosin, like what makes up muscles. To actually get those to lengthen, you have to hold a stretch for a minimum of 5 minutes.
Really?
Like nobody's doing that.
Nobody's doing that.
Nobody's holding, like, unless you're a gymnast, like you compete in the Olympics, like you're not holding stretches for 5 minutes, right? So fundamentally, even if, let's assume that the assumption is that the muscles are too short, let's assume that's the correct fact. The idea that if that was what I'm trying to do is my muscles are too short and I need to go from 6 inches to 8 inches, then like fundamentally you have to hold the stretch for at least 5 minutes to even have that, happen. So I was thinking, I love the mental models I think of like 4 squares, right? And I think of on the left, top left, do I have the right problem? And then on the bottom left, it's do I have the wrong problem? And then in the top right, it's do I have the right solution? And the bottom right, it's do I have the wrong solution? And I think here we have the wrong problem and the wrong solution.
Okay.
Right? So if the
matching up.
Yes, exactly. So even if the idea was that I need to increase the length of my musculature, right? That's actually technically the wrong problem that we're even talking about. We'll get to the right one in a minute. Well, then you'd have to hold the stretch to have the wrong problem, but the right solution to be in that upper right. You'd have to hold the stretch for 5 minutes, and nobody does that, right? They hold it for 30 seconds or a minute. So fundamentally, like we don't even just have the wrong problem. We don't even have the right solution to the wrong problem. And so I think that's where you get lots of stories. We get golfers all the time that are like, oh, I've been stretching, for the last 30 years every single morning, and I still can't touch my toes. I got to sit down to put my socks on, right? And that's because they're bringing the wrong solution to the wrong problem. Fundamentally, what the problem is for mobility is that people's brains essentially have locked down their body's ability to move, and that will present itself in terms of fascial restriction. So I always like the analogy of, it's cold, it's winter, off season, right? Everyone's wearing long sleeves. So if you raise your arm up over your head, your sleeve will slide down your arm. And I want you to think of your arm as your muscles, right? The things that we're saying are too tight. And I want you to think of the sleeve as basically is fascia, right? So all of our muscles have fascia around them. And so when we raise our arm up, the fascia or the sleeve should slide down, and that allows our arm to go up as high as we want. If now you bring your arm to your side, grab the kind of the armpit side of your sleeve, and now try to raise your arm, all of a sudden your arm doesn't go up as far.
Yeah.
And it's not because your arm has a problem, it's because the sleeve is restricted, right? Or the fascia around the muscle is restricted. And this is something that can happen either A, because you're not using the movements or the muscles. It can happen B, because you're not strong enough to support that motion. So the brain will try to restrict to keep you safe. And ultimately, I always use the analogy. It's kind of like you get duct tape, on your muscles and fascia, and things don't move as well as they should. So, in that instance, if I'm holding the underarm of my sleeve, I can try to stretch that arm as much as I want. That duct tape, my hand isn't moving. That's holding, that's restricting it. Yeah. Ultimately, and I think this is the good news, if you just get rid of your hand, all of a sudden the arm immediately goes up overhead, right? And that relationship of the sleeve to the arm immediately present themselves. And I think that's the cool thing when you go after mobility for most golfers. It's using lacrosse balls or cricket balls or baseballs. Pick your hard ball, apply it to that spot.
Pick your torture.
Exactly. Pick your torture. It could be a Theragun or a Theracane, whatever. You got your softball right there. Exactly. Not so soft though. It's named incorrectly. It's, the immediacy of that release of all of a sudden, boom, you see 10 degrees, 20 degrees of more motion. It happens because now we've identified the right problem. We think back to that mental model. We've now identified the right problem. The right problem is I have a tissue restriction. It's not that it's not long enough. It's just that it's duct taped down, or the other analogy I'll use is think of spaghetti all parallel on a plate, right? And if you take a fork and you twirl it all around, all of a sudden that spaghetti, which maybe started 3 inches long, each end may only be an inch from each other, right? But it's not because the spaghetti got shorter, it's because you twirled it around the fork. And so when you use a soft tissue tool like that, all of a sudden the spaghetti falls off the fork onto the plate, and magically those two ends return to their normal length from each other. And that's what we see when you bring the right solution, which is going after these tissue restrictions, rip the duct tape or get the spaghetti off the fork. By using the right tools, now all of a sudden you have the right problem, you have the right solution. And this is where we see golfers all the time, like immediately adding 20, 30 degrees to their hips and their back pain goes away, or all of a sudden they can move their shoulder, and that elusive, club on plane just happens because now their shoulder can actually move. They don't have to compensate for it. And so we can go so deep into this, but I think at the top level, fundamentally, the problem with the idea of stretching is that people argue all day about stretching, and in reality, it's the wrong problem to begin with. It's not a length problem. It's really the right problem is, hey, it's either a tissue restriction because we don't have enough strength to control the motion, so our brain has locked us down, or we haven't used the motion in a long time, so our brain has just kind of forgotten how to move through there. It's not truly that it's supposed to be 8 inches and the muscle's only 6 inches.
I know when I first started with Josh, one of your trainers, and got me going with the softball and the lacrosse ball and things like that, it was incredibly painful at first to actually roll on it, thinking, Jesus, is this actually doing me any good? Is that pain, Chris, is that reflective of restriction? And if you roll on the softball or the lacrosse ball or whatever, and you do feel some pain, that's an indication then, well, that's why you actually need to do the work.
Yeah. So it's funny. So I always tell people the way to know the exact spot that was going to give you the biggest return is get to the spot that makes you come up with the newest 4-letter word that you've never said before. That's usually the right spot. But in actuality, it's the pain or the discomfort that you feel. That's actually the brain, that's a protective response.
Yep.
And so that area is so hypersensitive that the brain is it's freaking out because it's getting input into the tissue saying, hey, we're intentionally not moving out of that range because we don't think that's safe. And so that pain is actually a warning signal. And so you feel the discomfort or the pain in the brain because the brain is interpreting that as, it's called a big fancy word, noxious stimuli, right? But it's basically thinks it's something bad, right? It's like, it's like my kids when I try to make them eat a vegetable. It's like you think I'm trying to poison them, right? And it's like, no. Right? And then, you put some salt and pepper and actually, it's not that bad, right? And so the brain needs to kind of go through this period of realizing that it's not actually in danger.
And then once you get this and you start to be a little bit more mobile, and the results I've had have been incredible, really. From the first time I did the 4 tests, which we'll come on to at the end, failing every one of them miserably and by a significant distance, to actually get to a point a few months later where you're passing all of these tests, it does give you a tremendous impetus to keep going and working with it. But as you say, Chris, if you're jumping in at a strength program or a stretching program or whatever, and you haven't addressed this, wrong problem, wrong solution.
Yeah, and I think the hardest one for people is when they have the wrong problem but the right solution, right? Like someone says, "Oh, I don't have enough mobility." We'll go back to the toe touch that we started with. It says, "Oh, I don't have a big enough turn. I need to get more flexible," right? So they say, they listen to the podcast, but they stopped listening before right now. So they say, "Oh, I got to stretch my hamstring. I got to hold for 5 minutes." So they go and they hold their hamstring stretches for 5 minutes. Well, guess what? They're gonna go further, right? And so all of a sudden now maybe they get to the point after 3 months where they can touch their toes. Well, guess what? The ability to touch your toes isn't going to improve your rotational component. Right? It'll improve your ability to get your socks on, and if you like to deadlift or hinge, like it may help you in the gym, but you didn't actually fix the right problem. So I think that's actually where we see a lot of golfers is a lot of them will have a lot of the right solutions, right? But they're trying to solve the wrong problem. Like think of swing, like I don't want to come over the top. So they go and they find a good drill to stop coming over the top, but they don't realize that the reason they're coming over the top is because their shoulder doesn't rotate back or because they don't have the trunk rotation, or it's going to be something more physical, and they're trying to fix a physical problem with actually a pretty good technical solution if it was a technical problem, but it's not actually a technical problem. And so, I think that's something that people run into all the time is if you don't assess and you don't understand what the true right problem is, well, then you're dead from the start. Like even if you get the right solution, it's not going to fix the problem that you need. And I think that's where we always talk about the rotary tests and identify what the actual problem is that's stopping you from getting to where you want to be, and then you can go attack that.
Once you're making some progress there, what's the benefit of stretching, say, before you play? What is that becomes a useful protocol?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about like pre-play, so let's say you figure out you don't have good hip rotation or shoulder rotation, whatever it may be. You go ahead and you get your softball, and all of a sudden you start passing the tests. There's pre-play. It's actually, when we look at the game of golf, let's say swinging your driver, the way muscles that they contract, I always say, think of like caterpillars or centipedes, right? With lots of little legs, right? And if you think of like if one centipede was on its back and the other one was like their feet were touching each other, the more feet that are crossing, if they all contract, you get 100 and 100, right? That's going to be a very strong movement that's going to occur. If you only had 2 legs crossing, that would not be as strong of a contraction, right? So your muscles are kind of like that, in that they have these little fibers that kind of like grab and pull each other. If you actually do stretch, like truly like hold a stretch for a long period of time before you go play, what ends up happening is instead of 100 or centipede feet touching each other, you get to the point where you have less than 100. So maybe I'll be extreme and say maybe there's only 2 touching. So the contraction, the strength of that contraction is actually going to be less. So they've done studies where they said, don't do any warm up, just go hit golf balls. And then they have a control group that does that again a second day. The intervention group the second day, they stretch. So they hold stretches.
Right.
That group actually swings slower than when they did nothing. Right. And think of it as it's because they have less, quote unquote, centipede feet touching each other. Right. There's a second intervention group or third group, right? So your control group, the stretch group. The third group, they go and they actually do a dynamic warm-up. So they do like leg swings, lunges with rotations. They do soft tissue work. So they do like foam rolling and soft, softball stuff, right? All the stuff that we're talking about that actually address the right problem. Those people swing faster than they did doing nothing. So, and that's because they've not only maintained the, all the centipede feet touching each other, but they've also increased the internal temperature of the musculature, and they've removed any fascial restrictions. So they've loosened up any duct tape. So they have more range of motion. They still have all 100 of the centipede feet, for example, like touching each other. So they have a strong contraction. But now by getting rid of the duct tape, think of it as like a car accelerating. The group who doesn't get rid of the duct tape, if they, on the day of doing nothing, let's say they're on ramp, to get, was maybe 100 feet, say 100 meters, right? Well, the group that did the dynamic warm-up, they may now have 200 meters to accelerate. Right. So they've got a longer on-ramp. So they're going to be able to apply the same amount of force as they did the day that they did nothing, because they still have those 100 centipede feet. But they also get to do it for double the time. So that's increases what's called impulse, which is the simple analogy is, think of, let's say I'm sitting in a chair. My chair right now has wheels on it, right? And let's say you're over here in the States and you're cranky because you didn't sleep on the airplane. So I'm sitting in front of a wall, maybe 6 inches, and you push me as hard as you can into the wall, right? I don't know, I didn't have the right coffee that you enjoyed or something, right?
English tea.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. So you push me as hard as possible into the wall, right? I'm probably not going to be very happy with you, but I'm not going to need to go to the hospital. If instead I'm like 100 feet, like I'm down our big hallway, there's 100 feet to the wall, and you get to push with the same force, but you get a running start for that 100 feet to push me. When I hit that wall, I'm going to need some medical attention.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't get any stronger in either case, right? So
the build-up was greater.
But the buildup was greater. You went from 100 meters to 200 meter, right? So you had a longer buildup. So that's what's called impulse. And so I think that's what happens when you warm up correctly, is you maintain the max contraction that you can produce, versus as you lose that if you stretch for long, like before you play.
Right.
But you also now get the benefit of being able to do that over a longer period of time, where you increase your impulse. And I think that's when we see guys who improve their mobility and all of a sudden their speed goes up. It's because now they just have a longer period of time to apply the force that they had. And that's the ultimate kind of win of what you're looking for from a warm-up.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, Chris, in terms of practicalities with, foam rollers and softballs and things like that for a lot of folks. What would be the deterioration? Let's say I do all of that at home. How much time have I got before there's a deterioration in the benefit of that warm up before I actually start playing at the course, if I can't do all that stuff at the golf course?
Yeah, for sure. So typically if it's a nervous system improvement, it'll tend to last about 20 minutes. Right. So if you have more than 20 minutes from when you do the soft tissue work, so like, for instance, I live about 30 minutes from the course that I'll play at. Yeah. So I usually will, in the morning, I will do my soft tissue work, my mobility stuff. So I'll roll on softballs or lacrosse balls. And then I'll get in the car and I'll drive to the course. I'm not going to do that again, right? I don't have time. People may laugh at me. I don't have a ball in my locker because somebody played a joke and took it out of my locker or whatever. But when I get to the golf course, I've already done that tissue work. And particularly if you're doing it on a regular basis, to your point of the example where like you've done it for a couple of weeks, when we see within 2 to 4 weeks, if you're doing it about 15 minutes a day, that it'll stick, right? Like it doesn't like magically disappear in that 30 minutes that I drive there because I'm doing it regularly. Now, will I lose maybe a degree or two? Sure. But when I get onto the range, I'm going to do a dynamic warm-up, which is what we saw in that study, right? And the ideal for a dynamic warm-up is multi-joint movements, meaning, so like if I do a lunge, right, where I put one foot out in front of the other and I bend down, so my trail knee goes to the ground and my foot is flat on my front foot, right? So I'm bending my ankle, my knee, and my hip, right? So there's multiple joints moving. And then I'm going to add a rotation or a reach over, right? So now I'm moving, not only am I moving my ankle, my knees, and my hips, but I'm also moving my spine and my arms and my shoulders. So there's a lot of different movement going around. I could do leg swings. I could do arm swings. That'd be single joint. But I'm going to do it multiple times. I'm going to try to get my heart rate up. You could do air squats, for example. What that does is that increases the internal temperature of your body. Now, I love analogies, so use another one. Think of like silly putty. If you have silly putty, if you have kids, my kids have put that in the freezer, and when you take it out, it's like a rock, right? That's like a 65-year-old guy trying to go play in 40-degree weather with no warm up. Not going to be a lot of flexibility, very little X factor, right? No stretch. Yeah. Versus if you take that silly putty and you put it in the microwave or boiling water, right? Yeah. And then now it's really stringy and really open. So the warmer the temperature gets, it's very much like our muscles.
Right.
And so by doing multi-joint movements and getting our heart rate up, we actually are creating internal friction in the joints. Friction creates heat. And then by doing that, obviously our internal body temperature rises, the muscles are going to be more pliable. And that will give you, the best opportunity to play well and move well. And so I think doing the soft tissue work consistently, kind of day-to-day basis, you're not going to lose anything by not having that at the golf course and having to drive 30 minutes or 45 minutes, however long it is. But doing that dynamic warm-up will help to open and unlock that, where you can actually be productive when you go out and play.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing with this, Chris, and we've touched on it before, but I think it's a good thing to revisit, that for me, getting into this stuff and getting involved in an effective warm-up like that, to me, the mental benefits are so strong, because by definition, if you're putting your attention in certain parts of your body, and if you're focused on your physical body, you're not quite so much in your own head. You're not in your own head battling your thoughts about what may or may not happen on the golf course today. I think when you do a warm-up really well, you're present to that experience. So, maybe we've not highlighted this enough. I think a physical warm-up is a tremendous mental preparation for the game as well, because everything mentally is slowing down and becoming more present to what's actually going on.
100%. And I think we see that all the time, not just on the golf course, but we have 2-day events once a month that we run here at our facility. We'll have anywhere between 10 to 20 people that will fly in. And I think one of the coolest things to illustrate this is on the second day in the morning, we do the morning starts with an hour-long mobility class. So we have identified all their areas that they need to work on, and we do all the mobility stuff for about an hour. And all of them will pick up it's a little over 5 degrees in every single joint of rotary movement. Mm-hmm. And then we go and we do a speed workout where we actually get their nervous system going, right? So they're super in tune with their body. We're telling them what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then the last station in the speed drills is actually hitting golf balls into the simulators, and all they see on the screen is clubhead speed, right? So and we have their clubhead speed from day one, and they're trying to create as big of a delta on day 2. And we have some guys that have picked up 10, 15 miles an hour in this activity. It's pretty wild.
Wow.
But 0 people have gotten hurt. And the interesting thing is, because they mentally know that they're more mobile, they feel good, they're in tune with their body, they've been moving fast and explosive in the 3 stations prior to the swings, the only thing left at that point is the mind. Yeah. Right. And so I think that's where we'll work with people that they're afraid of where the ball is going to go. And we're like, we really don't care where the ball goes. You can make if you break your club, if you say you swung 95 miles an hour yesterday, if you swing 95.2 miles an hour and you have the biggest idiot mark on your club head, we don't care. We're celebrating. We're high-fiving because you broke that barrier. And I think when the body is in a good spot, you're warmed up, mentally your body's good, that eliminates such a big variable or an unknown of is it going to be okay? And you have that confidence that, hey, my body's good. Well, now you can really kind of now the hard part I think is honestly is mentally letting go. We see it all the time in that speed. It's literally I don't care where the ball, and they're like, wait, what? I'm like, no, that's why you can't see where the ball flies. Literally the only thing on the screen is a number of how fast you're swinging. And that's hard for some people.
And as well, Chris, not sorry to interrupt, but not trying to control the positions in your golf swing.
Yes. Just being athletic and knowing that your body can get, and just feeling, where can my body go? Right. And they're like, well, how far do I swing back? Well, as far as you can. Like whatever feels good. Right. And I think it's always interesting to me every month when people come in and like the look of shock on, like the light bulb of like, oh, if I just do it, it goes faster. Yeah. Like let it go. Like right. And so I do think there's so much uncontrollable in the game of golf. We see this at the highest of high levels. If your body's in a good spot, that eliminates so much of the variability in the unknown. Like that is 100% knowable. I think mental is the same thing, like knowing yourself, knowing your process, understanding how you react under stress, all the stuff that you talk about and that you coach all your players on. Like, to me, the physical and the mental are the two most controllable areas. You can't control. You can hit the greatest shot in the world. If it hits a sprinkler head and goes OB, like nothing. What are you going to do about that? Like, right. But you can control, are you physically ready and are you mentally ready? And then in the arena, how do you, obviously the mental is a shot to shot sort of thing. The physical, it's kind of, you do all the prep work, you make sure you're ready to go. And then the physical really should just take care of itself throughout the round.
Yeah.
I think that's the nice thing about the physical is in round, you shouldn't really have to think about it if you did all the right stuff. Mentally, that's a different animal, but that's why there's you.
That's why, I've got a job, fortunately. Yeah. Just one thing, another one I wanted to touch on, because and I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's such a really interesting area. You mentioned, the holy grail for a lot of people in terms of technical improvement in the golf swing, shallowing the club on the downswing and approaching it more from the inside, which we know those are all beneficial things. Why, could you go into some detail about why for a lot of people that's potentially impossible for them to do because of the way that their body's actually moving, and just by telling themselves to move in a certain way, that's really, really not going to happen?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty well known at this point, particularly in the age of YouTube, like what kind of an efficient golf swing should quote unquote look like, right? I think there's obviously some misconception that there's one swing that is the way to go. And I mean, if you look on tour now, all those guys and girls swing different from each other. Right?
Yeah.
Not too many Furyks of the world anymore, but at this point, it's pretty well understood of what are the efficient kind of positions and characteristics that you like to see in a golf swing. What is not well understood by particularly the amateur, but I see it at the professional level all the time too. We'll get guys come in and they're just, I joke that most professionals are just better cheaters, and that they are just really good athletes at cheating into different positions, even though physically they have no business being in those positions.
Really? Right.
I'll never forget my first time I ever got to work with a bigger name golf pro. It was Carl Pedersen. He was a local Raleigh guy at the time. He was I think he was in his 40s at that point. That was the first eye-opening experience that I had of like, every time I would try to block him from cheating in an exercise, he'd come up with a second compensation. And all right, I'm going to block. All right, don't do this or this. Then there'd be like a third. And I'd be like, dude, how are you do? Okay, well, don't do any of those three. Okay, now go. And then there'd be a fourth one. I'm like, I don't have enough hands to stop you from cheating in all these different ways. And you see this in the golf swing, that a lot of golf pros, even though if you look at them in slow-mo on Sunday on the TV, they're like, wow, look at this position and how much lag. When you actually get them in and you actually measure what their body can and cannot do, most of them will fail more than just one test.
Really?
They're just incredibly good maybe in their hip, and that can overshadow what their trunk or their shoulder can't do, right? And so they get away with it until generally we start to see stuff like a Will Zalatoris and like the mid to late 20s when we start to see guys kind of starting to break down.
Yeah.
Amateurs, we don't have that cheating superpower. So our physical limitations tend to kind of show themselves a little bit more in the golf swing in terms of less efficient and those sorts of things. And so the average person listening right now, if you have if your swing is doing something that you don't like or it's inefficient, that's likely because you physically just can't do the efficient one, right? Your body's trained to find the least path of resistance. And if you're taking one that is harder, it's likely because you just can't get there. And so I think if you try, we go back to that mental model that I love, if you're trying to apply the correct technical solution for the over the top or you're starting with your upper body versus your lower, but whatever the situation may be, you're not getting to your lead side early enough.
Yeah.
You may have the greatest drill that's 100% appropriate.
Yeah.
If it was a technical problem, but it might be because your lead hip doesn't internally rotate. And so no matter how many times you do that drill, and unfortunately I've seen this hundreds of times where a golfer will come to us they hurt their low back. And they're like, you start asking them, well, what happened? And they say, well, I was taking lessons from my golf pro and he's trying to get me to do this move. I practiced it for hours this past, last 2 weeks, and now my back's hurting. And the pro, it's not the pro. And unfortunately, a lot of times they'll blame it on the golf professional. And you're like, well, technically that's the right solution. Unfortunately, it's if it was a technical problem, but they didn't assess your hip, they didn't know, or whatever it may be. And because your hip's not moving, trying to do this fix over and over and over again, you're just literally banging, Carl is pushing you down the hall in a chair into a wall repeatedly. And eventually, the back is just it's going to say, I've had enough. I'm tired of taking over all the extra load that the hip's supposed to be doing. And that if they had truly just fixed the hip, you wouldn't have even needed that technical drill. I think cool story. One of the coolest stories is I had a young pro. He was here with his golf professional. His golf pro with his driver. This guy was not very long, so they were trying to optimize his driver. He's a smaller guy. I think he probably only drove the ball, carried it 260. Right? He's trying to play professional. He's going to really struggle.
Yeah.
A very good player, but just didn't have length. And the pro was like, he was hitting down on the golf ball with his driver, right? And so the pro was like, dude, we got to get you up. And no matter what they did, they literally for 3 months worked on this guy could not hit up on the golf ball with his driver. And so they bring him over to me. We look, and literally I looked at the guy's lead hip. It was the first test I did with him, and he moved 5 degrees. Normal should be 45 degrees. Wow. So he has no movement whatsoever. He was actually less than you, Carl.
He must have been in bad shape.
He was, but he was a young guy. So, we looked and it was tissue. So we do some tissue releases, and within 5 minutes, the guy has 40 degrees of motion. It can happen that quickly.
Right.
And so we did nothing else. They said, all right, go hit some golf balls. I'm just curious. Let's see what happens. And immediately he's hitting 3 up on the golf ball.
Wow.
And it's going a little over 10 yards further.
And he's been working on that technically for months,
for 3 months.
And months.
Yeah. And literally, and the body knows what he wants to do, right? There was no cues from me or the golf professional. It was just, all right, we cleaned up the hip. Let's see what happens. And all of a sudden he could execute what he'd been working on. Now, luckily for him, he didn't have any major injuries at that point. He had some back soreness, but he would attribute it to I hit hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of golf balls. But truly, it was just a matter of freeing up that physical limitation, allowed him to all of a sudden, he didn't try to do anything different. He could do what he was trying to do. And that to me just illustrated very vividly what a lot of amateurs struggle with is they work on these, especially the range rats. If you're a range rat out there, I hope you're listening. You're just banging these drills, and you're like, I'm not getting any better. I'm not getting any better.
Nothing's changing.
Yeah. And it's just, honestly, it's a lot of them, it's their body can't do it. So in order to accomplish the drill, quote unquote, correctly, they're doing what, Carl Pedersen did. They're just adding another compensation. And unfortunately, as amateurs, we can't get away with that. We have 1, maybe 2 if we're really lucky, but most of us don't get away with all those. And then now all of a sudden you fixed that one problem you were trying to address, but now you probably introduced another problem or inefficiency.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we end up chasing our tail a lot, I think, as amateurs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the great beauty of what you guys do, and I've certainly found this. As you progress to the gym, that's fine. But a lot of this stuff can actually be done initially at home, can't it? With the, with the foam rollers and the ball and things like that. I certainly made a load of progress before I actually got back in the gym itself.
Yeah, well, I think that's the beauty. I mean, even with our professionals, but I think our busy, business people who travel a bunch, or just busy home lives where you're raising kids or whatever, and you just don't have a gym close or don't like going to the gym. I always think of it as a pyramid. The old food pyramid that we had here in the States, where it was, I think it was grains or something on the bottom, right, or whatever it was. But I think mobility is the foundation of every one of our golf houses. Mm-hmm. And if we're trying to build the best house that's going to last for 100 years, if we have a good foundation on mobility, then we got a good chance. Mm. And really, truly, you just need like 6, yeah, like 6 feet square by square. So you can do it in an office a lot of the times. And if you have a ball, and if you have done the assessment, which you can do at home, and say, hey, that's a pass, that's a fail, and we tell you obviously how it compares to other people your age, or if you're trying to hit a certain swing speed, what numbers do you need in order to do that speed safely. And we find is if you can put in 15 minutes a day, 6 days a week, you can literally do it on your floor of your bedroom. Like you can pass all of those mobility tests. And now once you've passed, like you can literally build the foundation of your house without ever leaving your house. And now all of a sudden, then you can start talking about, strength, and depending where your strength levels are, maybe you need to go to the gym because you don't have heavy equipment. A lot of golfers honestly can start at home with bands. They don't need lots of heavy equipment, maybe because they've never done any exercise before, or they've had injuries, or post-surgical, whatever it may be. But yeah, and then everything, even going to the higher levels of a lot of like med ball work or jumping stuff, or any of the power level stuff, swinging. We get into like swing efficiency type things of how you're sequencing. Like none of that needs a gym. The only time you will need a gym is if you don't have a home gym and you're trying to swing 120 miles an hour and you need to squat or deadlift significant load, like 100, 200 kilos. Like if you're going crazy like that, if you don't have a home gym, you probably got to go somewhere where you can get that. But, I think the majority of people that we work with around the world don't leave their homes. And they all pick up, 10, 20 plus yards and just doing the basics. And it starts with, because there's identifying what the right problem is. And that the home assessment is a great way to do that. And then they're identifying, hey, okay, I'm going to bring the right solution to the right problem.
Wouldn't it be an interesting exercise for people who've maybe spent the last few years trying to improve and lower the scores, and they've looked at the swing endlessly, that they maybe reverse engineer this and get the body moving better, and maybe think a little bit clearer, a little bit more efficiently? And you must have seen this many times, because as you've already alluded to, where people, you said with the guy with the driver before, you must see it time and time again where people start putting the club in better positions just as a result of the body moving better. But they're not, this is the big thing for me, they're not having to consciously think so much about those positions.
Yeah, it was actually one of my physios this morning when I came into the office. He showed me a text from one of his guys. He goes, look at this cool text. He was at the range. It was finally somewhat warm here again, where people went out and they were hitting balls, I guess. And so the guy must have videoed himself at the range. He sends it in. He goes, I hadn't looked at myself. Like his text was basically like, I haven't looked at myself swinging, since it got cold through the Christmas season and New Year's, and it's probably been 6-8 weeks for him. And he's like, I had no idea that my position at the top looked so much better.
Really?
Because I wasn't thinking about it or anything. And like, he's like all of a sudden, like you could see he actually rotated into his trail side. The club was not crossed back over around his head. And the guy was like, I literally didn't think I was doing anything different, but I had my buddy film me, and when I looked at it, he was like, I was blown away. Like, and so he had sent a video he had taken pre-Christmas or whatever, and that's the kind of stuff that happens. The pro who magically, quote unquote magically, wasn't actually magic. It was just, we just unlocked what he couldn't do, who's all of a sudden starts hitting up on the golf ball. We had a 69-year-old guy in here last month at one of those events. He went from 96 miles an hour to 110 in 10 minutes.
That's
right?
incredible.
Just unlocking stuff, right? Like, and I think that's when you're able to do that, and without really, the key is they didn't have to think about it. We just kind of got rid of the physical thing that was whatever was blocking them, and magically, I think a lot of amateur golfers are better golfers than they get credit for, because their body takes that credit away from them.
Yeah,
I think ultimately is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, I can't recommend you guys highly enough, Chris. It's been a real eye opener and body opener for me completely. And it's been I say this with genuine respect to what you do. I mean, I thought, that my history, what happened post surgery and all the rest of it, and all the challenges with that. But to get back in the gym has been such a major breakthrough for me again, and it all started with you guys. So I can't thank you enough for that. But where for perhaps people who've maybe heard it before and not done anything, what's the first steps, Chris? What do folk need to do to maybe get involved and find out where they're at, and what actions to take?
Yeah, I think the first step for me is always to go assess and just see where you're at. And so we have the free assessment that anyone listening here can go check out at Par for Success. So par the number 4 success.com/Mind Caddie. Go check it out as a listener to the show. You also will get the opportunity, if you'd like it, to jump on we'll do 45 minutes with you for free via Zoom, go through the results with you, tell you what they mean, tell you how bad or how good you are, hopefully how good you are, but also answer any questions. I think the cool part about those calls is we'll go through and tell you, like, how do you compare to other golfers your age? What are your goals this season? Like, if you're at 90 miles an hour and you want to get to 100, like, what does that look like? What do you need to be able to do? And so I think before you do anything, or even if you are currently doing something, go take the assessment and see how you do. See if you are doing the right things for the wrong problem, or are you, and make sure you're identifying and addressing the right problem, and then bring the right solution to it. So Par for Success, par the number 4 success.com/Mind Caddie. It's all there for you, totally free.
Chris, I know you're a busy man. Thanks again for coming on. Always thoroughly enjoy chatting with you. It's always some fantastic information, practical and useful information. But thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carl. Enjoyed it.
Mind Caddie.